Test. Test. Test.
Oh.
Madam Clerk, we opened a regular meeting of the City Council and Redevelopment Successor Agency, Clearlake City Hall, Council Chambers 14050 Olympic Drive. Madam, can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Kramer.
Here.
Councilmember Overton. Councilmember Claffey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Purdott.
Here.
Mayor Slutin.
Here. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father in heaven, we call on you to be with us in this meeting tonight. We ask that your spirit would lead and guide us, that we may do the good work of this city. We give you all the glory and the blessing and the gratitude that we have in our hearts. We ask this in your son's holy name. Amen.
Okay. All items on the agenda will be open for public comment before final action is taken. Speakers must restrict comments to the items as it appeared on the agenda and stay within 3 minutes limit, 3-minute time limit. The mayor has discretion of limiting the total discussion time for an item. If remote participants encountering technical difficulties, I will ask that we continue discussing the item and the participant can rejoin when the technical difficulty is resolved. Again, if you are a participant on Zoom and not speaking, please mute your microphone to prevent distraction from the current speaker. First item on the agenda is adoption on the agenda. Do we have any changes on the agenda?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
Make a motion to accept the agenda as submitted, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Mayor Purdock and a second by Councilman Kramer. We'll go to our electronic voting. Madam Clerk, would you read the results of the vote?
I haven't got there yet. I'm not finding my spot. Mr. City Manager, can you give me a hand? Neither do I, apparently.
Are you logged in?
Well, I've got this up. Scroll. Oh, up there. I think we need Melissa. That just arrows just to the bottom. Well, that's. we're on there.
Yes, the technical difficulties is on this end.
All right, Mr. Mayor. The vote is unanimous in favor of adoption of the agenda.
All right, we have announcements and actions from closed session. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, there's no action for closed session.
Thank you. We'll move now to presentations. We have a presentation of January adoptable dogs. Lieutenant Hobbs, I presume.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Unfortunately, tonight there's not a dog that's able to come in due to some employees that are sick at the shelter. I'll give you a brief update on the statistics so far. As we talked about at the last meeting in December, we had stats for live release right about 98%. Between the last meeting in December and the end of the year, we didn't euthanize any more animals, so our live release was right at 98% for the year. So far this year, we've brought in 30 dogs into the shelter. 16 have gone to rescues, 2 have gone back to their owners, 0 have been euthanized. So it's looking good so far. Hopefully we'll be able to stay where we did last year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Okay, we'll go to public comment. This is a time for any member of the public to address the city council on any matter not on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. The Brown Act, with limited exceptions, does not allow the council or staff to discuss issues brought before under public comment. The council cannot take action on non-agenda items. Concerns may be referred to staff or placed on the next available agenda. Please note that comments from the public will also be taken on each agenda item. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person. And if you're on Zoom, please use your raise hand feature if you wish to speak during public comment. Do we have any public comment in the council chambers? If not, do we have any public comment on Zoom, Madam Clerk?
There is one member of the public with their hands raised. in the Zoom, and that is Tony Sarks.
Okay, Tony,
Mr. Sarks? You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Sorry, this is my first time doing this. My name is Tony Sarkis. Thanks for letting me speak. This is in regard to Clearlake Animal Control. From what I understand, the city contracted out with North Bay Animal Services about roughly 5 or 6 months ago. And we've been having a problem in the avenues with 2 black labs mauling cats, killing cats. They killed 3 bunny rabbits, and most of these were people's pets. I filled out a formal complaint form off of the North Bay Animal Services website, and I sent it directly to the director, Mark Smith. That was a month ago, and I never heard back from anyone. There have been many calls to the city about the 2 black labs that have been terrorizing the Avenues neighborhood. And these dogs have killed at least 10 cats that I know of, 3 pet rabbits and a small dog. And these are just the animals that I know about that have been killed. And we all know it's against Clearlake City Ordinance for these or any dogs to roam freely in public. These dogs are not just freely roaming, they're killing people's precious pets and damaging people's properties. And in closing, I just want to say maybe the city should reconsider its relationship with North Bay Animal Services, as this is a serious quality of life issue here in the city of Clearlake. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Sarkis.
Thank you, Mr. Sarkis.
Thank you.
All right, if any more people have their hands raised in Zoom?
There are no further hands raised in the Zoom, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we'll move to the consent agenda. Anybody who wants to pull any item from the consent? Open it to the public. Anybody wants to pull an item from the consent agenda? If not, we're taking it back to the council.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
We have a motion by Councilman Kramer and a second by Councilwoman Overton. So we'll go to our electronic voting. Madam Clerk, you will read the results?
The vote was unanimous in favor of adopting the consent agenda.
Right, we go to item number 11, which is a continuation from the January 6th of January 6th, 2022. Consideration of an appeal, AP 2021-04 of the Planning Commission approval of the conditional use permit application CUP 2021-05 through 08 and approval of the corresponding mitigated negative declaration 2021-02 for commercial cannabis operation located at 2185 Auglin Canyon Road. The next, this is an item that we continued from last meeting. The appellant is ready to give a presentation on this, Mr. Hughes. And I like to make sure that we have this meeting moving, and we give you 50 minutes, and I'll give you some more, but we can't go on and on and on forever.
I got the hint.
Okay.
My name is Dave Hughes, and while I am the one that filed the appeal, the appellant is actually the neighborhood, and we have over 30 property owners, I guess, kind of west of this project. I'm probably one of the closest as far as residences go. I appreciate the continuance. And I'm actually expecting more info, but I found out today I probably won't get it till tomorrow. And that had to do with wells. The first thing I wanted to do was read from CEQA on cumulative impacts. And It refers to two or more individual effects which, when considered together, are considerable or which compound or increase other environmental impacts. The individual effects may be changes resulting from a single project or a number of separate projects. The cumulative impact from several projects is the change in the environment which results from the incremental impact of that project when added to other closely related past, present, and reasonably foreseeable probable future projects. So not just the ones that exist, but ones that may come up. Cumulative impacts can result from individually minor but collectively significant projects taking place over a period of time. Reading from the Department of Cannabis Control comments back to the city after the city sent the information to them. One of their comments is on cumulative impacts. Of particular importance are topics for which the impacts of individual projects may be less than significant, but where individual projects may make a considerable contribution to a significant cumulative impact. And they made a comment here, the initial study would be improved by acknowledging and analyzing the potential for cumulative impacts resulting from the proposed project, coupled with other cannabis cultivation projects being processed by the city and any other reasonably foreseeable projects in Clearlake that could contribute to cumulative impacts similar to those of the proposed project. So what we're trying to establish is that we think the applicant should have gone farther in determining the cumulative impact on the water. We have a fragile watershed. We have a good quality wells. Most of them are in the 50 to 100-foot range. Mine in particular is around 70 feet. I get 6 gallons a minute. My neighbor gets 6 gallons a minute. If you manage it, you can have a front yard and a backyard. I have a pool. This summer I did let the front yard die, and I put in a 3,000-gallon storage tank. So we have what we consider a fragile watershed that needs to be protected for the residential users. They've been there for years. We plan on staying there for years. And we would hate to become a critical watershed like, say, Big Valley is. I sent out a map earlier today, and Alan indicated he sent it to everybody. I have copies if you don't have. What I wanted to make sure is that the council understood where the watershed is, and I think you might have all gotten.
Yeah, I do. I think you better give to everybody. I did.
Thanks, Dave.
This one here.
So what I wanted to show you was make sure you understood where
Could
the
you,
watershed
yeah,
is.
please stay by the microphone,
sorry.
that people in the.
I wanted to make sure you knew where the watershed is. It extends all the way almost to Highway 20 on both the east and west sides of Highway 53. Comes down, it kind of sweeps around south of Auglin Canyon and then actually drains into the lake. So I wanted to make sure you knew that it's mainly replenished by rainwater. And I think that's in the hydrology studies that the applicant provided. But I wanted to make sure you knew where the watershed is. I had a couple of points I wanted to bring up with the hydrology studies. In the original study for November 9th, there's a mention that the Burns Valley groundwater basin has not been identified by the California Department of Water Resources as critically overdrafted. And like I said, Big Valley is really the only one in Lake County. We're trying to prevent that from happening to the Burns Valley watershed. Further on, she meant Angie Dodd mentions that the groundwater management plan dated 2006 and does not include the demand for additional proposed cannabis cultivation projects in the Burns Valley groundwater basin. The total additional proposed cannabis cultivation is unknown. And then under her limitations, the study of groundwater hydrology is very complex and often relies on limited data, especially in rural areas. Recommendations and conclusions provided herein are based on professional judgment made by using information of the groundwater systems and geology. That alone is reason for caution and reason to take our time. The 2006 study is over 15 years old now. In her response to our appeal, the appellant indicated many wells have been adversely impacted by the development of vineyards and other cannabis projects. However, no information was provided. Verbal correspondence with the city and Lake County have indicated anecdotal evidence of lower well production, possibly dry wells in the Burns Valley watershed without specific context or data. Reports of dry wells are only anecdotal and cannot be adequately assessed using available data. No wells have been reported going dry. I want to make a comment there. You know, I didn't even realize that I could sign up with Water Resources at the county and have my well monitored free. I've done that. Now it's been a month and a half and I haven't heard anything, but we live out there, we have a well, we deal with it. Not knowing that if we're having issues, we can actually report them to the state. There's a place we can go. So now that we're organized, you're going to see more of that happening. Let's see. Oh, she also mentioned that Google Earth imagery and extensive ag development. She mentions that the vineyard, I mentioned a vineyard, it's the vineyard on the west side of the highway. She mentions it being established prior to 2003. And I have an MLS printout. It's for sale for $20 million, 774 acres, 190 acres of vineyard that began operation in 2006. She mentioned that in her report that the vineyard should have been considered in the 2006 management plan, but I doubt that it was, because if they didn't start till 2006, the management plan was adopted, I think, in March of 2006. So anything to do with cannabis in the area or that vineyard would not have been included, or the vineyard on the east side of the highway. Let's see, propose, okay. She further started doing some analysis of, she has a table here of approximate water demand of proposed cannabis projects and refers to a number of approved cannabis grows. And she mentions 1756 Auglin Canyon, 2050 Auglin Canyon, 2185 Auglin Canyon, 2160 Auglin Canyon, which actually used to be a kennel. And when the approval was done on 2050 and 2122 Auglin Canyon, which is in the county, the property owner there was concerned about odor. The city wrote a letter saying you can grow within the 1,000-foot setback. She actually sold out. She'd been in business there for 25, 30 years. And she has sold now to cannabis people. So that's why this is on here. I don't know of any proposed use yet, but she added it to it. And 2560 Highway 53, I don't know where that is. I got a report from the county today showing almost 280 cannabis projects in Lake County. It doesn't include the city, almost 280. So I went through the list. So in addition to the ones that she listed, there's also 1020 Junction Plaza, 1100 and 1150 Highway 53, 1850 Auglin Canyon, 1000 and 1270 Highway 53. She's mentioned 2050 Auglin Canyon Road, which also includes 2122 Auglin Canyon Road. And I believe you all get a copy of my this map.
I did not, David.
Okay, this, well, let me hand it out now.
Yeah, but it's too small.
You're getting close to the 15 minutes, so. Thank you.
Thanks.
No, I won't.
What I attempted to do with this, and pardon my artwork. This basically, the blue lines encircle approved grows or grows that are in the process. If you can read it, 1000 and 1270 at the top, that's one project. To its right, 1100, 1150, and 950 are another project. 1756 is one. 1620 is one. 2185 is the subject that we're here for. 2050 and 2122 are the grow right outside the city limits. 1850 is approved. 2560, just below the old highway, is the project that's under construction right now on Highway 53. And 3000, I didn't even know about, is a little bit south of that. Most of those are in the county. Then I also indicate where 2160 is, which is just below 2185. Then I wanted to show the vineyard. So on the west side, you've got the 190 acres of vineyard. And I drew a line to another property that has a vineyard on it. Yeah, you've probably seen it. It's got the house, the vineyard. And I believe there's a marijuana grow on the south end of that property looking at Google Earth, which is not permitted that I know of. In addition, there's a property, there's one more property out there that the lady, I understand, grows every year. If you look at a Google Earth, you can see it, and it's not a permitted grow. So I'm just trying to indicate there's a lot going on in Ogden Canyon. And because of that, we'd like to see more study done before these projects proceed. Real quickly, I talked to a gentleman that I have when I have a well issue or I need a well inspection, or he takes care of my well, Scott Brown of Caltech Pumps. He indicated, like, the Ogden Canyon area, what used to be the hops farm, they originally put in 4 wells in 2007, and out of the 4, they had to replace 2 of them within a few years. What's important is how the well is drilled, where it's perforated in the casing to allow water in from 60 feet, say, to 200 feet. The well can actually work as a conduit for water to travel from an upper aquifer to a lower aquifer. You have a 9-inch bore, you have a 4.5-inch casing. The county only requires the top 20 feet of that well to be encased with concrete or whatever they use. The balance of that well is gravel around the 4.5-inch casing. And then where it's perforated, so the water can actually flow into the well and work as a conduit for the water from the upper aquifer to go to the lower aquifer.
3 more minutes, David.
He also said a number of the ag wells are 12-inch with 6-inch casing, again, the same thing. So what they act is a conduit from the upper to the lower strata. He also suggested a 4-hour pump test is a lot different than operating a pump 365 days a year, or maybe more intensely when the actual growing period is. There's a such thing as a zone of influence. And the zone of influence is an area of groundwater which is affected by the pumping of a well. The faster the pumping rate, the larger the area of land above the cone of depression. And the cone of depression occurs when when groundwater is pumped from a well. When a well is pumped, the water level in the well is lowered. By lowering the water level, a gradient occurs between the water in the surrounding aquifer and the water in the well. So you've got a cone coming up from your well like this, and it's sucking the water while you're pumping your well. And again, we feel they should have gone further. They should analyze the wells that are in existence and what they use. We feel CEQA requires that. And we just feel it was insufficient. So I'll leave it at that for now.
You'll get a chance to rebut after the applicant makes their case. All right. Applicant, you have 15, 20 minutes to rebut. Because I think the appellant took about 20 minutes.
I won't be up here for that long. My name is Brian Pentak. I'm one of the managers for this project. Thanks for hearing the case today. I just wanted to kind of get back onto the subject of this actual property, because this isn't really a discussion for cannabis.
Brian, could you get closer?
Oh, sorry. Can I take my mask off or no? So this is more of a process that we're looking for 2185, not cannabis policy in general. But just a little bit of a reminder, before we bought this property from the city, we met with the city and it was determined, hey, we can utilize this for cultivation, for processing, for manufacturing, and for even mobile distribution. And that was our intention from the very beginning, and zoned industrial by the city, and that's what we've done. And so we've complied with all of the regulations, all of the studies. We provided 2 additional hydrology studies. So I feel like we've done above and beyond what was asked of us. And here we are. We have a well, of course, because that area is zoned industrial, and the only water, whether it was a cannabis property or whatever other industrial uses, is going to have to use a well. So we, of course, have a well. But I'll let Angie deal with all that. But as a reminder to the city too, there is in the development agreement, there is a nice revenue to the city of 5% of gross receipts to the city, as well as a $2 per square foot for the buildings. So I think the project will bring in revenue for the city, will bring in jobs, and the actual cultivation, by the way, is less than 1/2 of an acre. So pretty minor in the grand scale of things. So I just wanted to mention that and let Angie Dodd, who is our hydrologist, talk about the water, because that's the main issue here. So thanks for hearing me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll put it up for you. The misplaced the clicker. So you'll just have to let me know and I'll run through it for you.
So you're my clicker.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak, council. I'm Angie Dodd with North Point Consulting. I have a PhD in water resources engineering, and I was hired to write the hydrology reports for this project. Initially, a hydrology report to support the application that was heard at the hearing, and then a response to the appellant's concerns. And so I have hopefully a brief presentation to kind of clarify. I'm not going through all the weeds in this presentation. I tried to make it more simplified, just to go through the facts. And I have weird eyes, so we'll see how I can do this. I might just read and then have you click. Okay. So I just want to remind everyone that the purpose of the hydrology study and the purpose of CEQA is to evaluate the potential impacts of the proposed project on the surrounding groundwater resources. That's the proposed project that we're talking about tonight at 2185 Auglin Canyon Road, which is a project that proposes manufacturing, processing, distribution, and office space and ancillary cultivation and greenhouses. It's actually less than a half an acre of canopy. It's within about 18,000 square feet of greenhouses. So the canopy would be less than 18,000 square feet. Using half an acre just to be conservative on the high side. I try to always err on the high side in terms for conservativeness. Next slide, please. So the project water demand, there are two portions of demand, one associated with the cultivation. So the cultivation would be about 1,500 gallons a day to support a half an acre of canopy. The annual demand based on a 300-day growing season would be about 450,000 gallons. That's about 1.4 acre feet. And then there's also an employee demand, which would be about 350 gallons per day. So that's another 130,000 gallons, or a total annual demand of 580,000 gallons. And that's about 1.8 acre feet of demand for the proposed project. Next slide, please. There is an existing permitted groundwater well. It's a fairly deep well. It's screened at intervals 280 to 375. So it's not in that alluvial aquifer that most of the domestic wells in the lower basin are. As David said, they're about between 50 and 100 feet deep. That's that alluvial aquifer that's more impacted by drought conditions that I mentioned last time I spoke. The well that was drilled, when it was drilled, it yielded 80 gallons per minute. That's a pretty prolific well, which is common in that formation in this basin. So that would yield about 115,000 gallons per day. And the demand of the well, or sorry, the demand for the project is less than 2% that the well would yield in a day. So, and I have a pie chart showing the demand of the project versus the well demand. In terms of over pumping or pumping the well, when you think of a domestic well, that's somewhere around 8 to 12 gallons per minute of pumping. This is a fairly small project compared to a lot of the cannabis projects that are coming along in the county. This one would require probably a 10 to 20 gallon per minute pump, which could meet that demand and fill the storage. I forgot to mention the storage. The project also proposes 5,000 gallon water tanks, or 25,000 gallons of storage that would supply the project for about 13 and a half days. And a pump that would pump a fraction of the capacity would be able to fill that tank up in pretty much a day, or sorry, that storage. Next slide, please. As part of the analysis, we also estimated, or I also estimated, the groundwater recharge. And again, to be conservative, it was just the recharge over the project parcel. So I kind of see this as the project's contributing area, or project's fair share of its rainfall to the groundwater aquifer. That's not really how we consider groundwater, but I try again to be conservative. So the groundwater recharge was estimated for both a dry year and an average rainfall year over just that 21.3 acre parcel area. And using a water balance, a very common water balance scenario. And the estimated recharge during a dry year is 4.2 acre feet. And during a wet year is 5.6 acre feet. Next slide, please. Which demonstrates that just for the fair share area of the parcel, there's sufficient recharge to more than supply the project during both a dry and an average year, which are indicated, oops, previous slide. That one right there. So the blue is the percent of demand, and then the orange is the recharge. Next slide, please. The project is located in the Burns Valley groundwater basin. You saw the map that was provided to you from one of my hydrology reports. Recharge is from Burns Valley Creek, which is about a 12.5 square mile watershed. There are 3 water-bearing formations in the basin, the alluvial in the lower basin. It's most of the yellow in the south western portion. You can see the project parcel up in the northeastern portion, get my directions correct. The usable storage capacity of the basin has been estimated at 1,400 acre feet. Next slide. This is an image from, it has a few items in it. It has the city zoning, which shows the green hashed as the city's cannabis area. It shows the county area to the northeast. And it also provides the density of wells from the California Department of Water Resources well mapping system, which shows that the density of wells in the upper aquifer are pretty, it's more dense in the residential lower portion of the aquifer. Next slide. And looking at the cumulative impact of this proposed project, you have to take into account existing water demand and potential future water demand. So existing water demand, the lower portion of the basin is supplied by the Highlands Mutual Water Company, who its water supply is from Clearlake. It's not groundwater supply. Next slide, please. So what I did to estimate the water demand in the basin was, again, I'm trying to be conservative on the high side. So I assumed, David was correct, and I mentioned it in one of my reports, that the 2006 groundwater management plan, I don't think it considered all the vineyards. I did look at Google Earth, and the vineyards appeared to be there before 2006. The company may have not been operating by then, but those vineyards were not. If you look at the total demand in the 2006 groundwater plan for this basin, it doesn't match to that quantity of vineyards. So I added it to the analysis so we can capture the existing demand correctly in this basin. So estimating about 450 acres of vineyards at about half an acre foot per year would be 225 acre feet per year for the existing vineyards. And then the orchards, estimating that there are about 150 acres. I don't know if they're dry farmed or how they're farmed anymore, because they look like they're all part of residential activities, not commercial orchard activities, but I assumed 2.2 acre feet per year of water, again, to be conservative. That's typical for orchards if they're operating commercial activities. And then for purposes tonight, I also went and counted all the potential residences that are not within the Highland Water Company area. There's about 120 parcels that could obtain water or could be getting water from groundwater wells. According to the EPA, household uses on average 300 gallons of water per day. So the estimated residential demand is about 40 acre feet per year. So when you combine all 3 of those, the existing demand is about just under 600 acre feet a year. Now, a lot of numbers. I'll get to a conclusion quickly. And then we talk about the pending or approved cannabis projects. It sounds like there might be a few more, but I did account for that in the potential cannabis projects in the next slide. So the ones that I was able to find online through the CEQA portal, through county and city planning commission meetings, I found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects, which including this one, which is highlighted in blue, which would have a total demand of about 37 acre feet per year. That doesn't account for the fact that one of the projects on Ogden Canyon, Lake Vista, is replacing a former hops farm that uses quite a bit, the hops uses quite a bit more water than the cannabis. So by converting from hops to cannabis, you're actually reducing the water demand. But to be conservative, just left that in. Next slide. This is the location of the wells associated with those projects in that table. They're all in the upper aquifer, deeper, not within the alluvial valley, which is where most of the residential wells are that are seeing problems. Next slide. So far I've estimated existing water demand and the water demand of the pending or approved projects that I know of. But then there's we don't know who's going to come in and apply for cannabis cultivation in the future. So I tried to estimate realistically how much cultivation could possibly be permitted through the land use permitting program through a use permit at both the city and the county. So we looked at the parcels in the county zone that had appropriate zoning to allow for its outdoor cannabis cultivation, rural land agriculture, and then within the city's cannabis zone. So that the more orange, yellow colors are the potential county parcels. Some of those are already covered up by vineyards. So if cannabis would end, they would replace vineyards, which are already using water. And then the city's cultivation zone. Next slide. So within the county, you got to take into account topography. You got to take into account stream side setbacks, the restrictions that both the state, the county, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Water Resources Control Board put on cannabis projects. So the potential area, if you exclude the cannabis projects that were in the table, if you exclude already developed agriculture, there's a potential probably for 20 acres for county use permit if they could get approved and you can find the appropriate flat topography and setbacks. That would equate to a demand of about 33 acre feet per year. And then I think I'm much more conservative on the high side in the city because the city only allows cannabis either indoor or mixed light within greenhouses. It has to be within a structure, which stricter requirements in terms of topography, building, funding for that. But again, to be conservative, I assumed 20 acres of mixed light cultivation, which has a longer cultivation period. So that's about 107 acre feet per year. So the potential demand, if the land use could come in, if the financial incentive was there, if everything fell into place, would be about 107 acre feet per year. Next slide. So when you add all that up and look at it on a pie chart, the existing agriculture, that's the orchards, which I probably overestimated, and the vineyards, the majority of the demand, about 70%. Potential cannabis is about, I can't read that, it's about 20%. And then you can see that the existing residential and the permitted cannabis are a small fraction of both of those. Next slide. But is there sufficient water? So when you look at the geology of the basin, the Burns Valley usable store, it has a storage capacity of 4,000 acre feet. The usable storage capacity was estimated by the Department of Water Resources at 1,400 acre feet. So considering all the existing, the cannabis projects and the potential future demand, the cumulative demand is about 53%, leaving about 47% remaining in that usable storage capacity. So there's still storage remaining. The cumulative demand is 53% of that usable storage capacity. And just remember, we're talking about Auglin Canyon Road and the cumulative impacts associated with Auglin Canyon Road. Auglin Canyon Road's percent of that usable storage capacity is only 0.1%. It's 1.8 acre feet. Next slide. Fortunately, the Burns Valley Basin has a California Department of Water Resources monitoring well within the basin that's been monitoring the well since the 40s. The location is in the lower portion of the valley. It's actually a deeper well, though. It's about, I think if I remember correctly, it's about 170 feet. It's not in the lower, it's not in the alluvium. It's in the lower, more prolific formation, similar to where a lot of the agricultural wells are located. Next slide. So looking at the monitoring well data over since, I think it's 1980, it's hard to see the date on there. So this is back to the 80s. There's really no decreasing or increasing trend in the, this is monitoring data that monitors the elevation in the well in the fall when you have the most drawdown, and then recharge in the spring. So you can see that it's consistently recharging in the spring and a pretty stable trend in this, at least in this deeper aquifer, which is where the project's well is located. Next slide. So just to conclude specifically for Auglin Canyon Road for the 2185, the project that we're talking about tonight, the total demand, including the canopy of cultivation and the employees, is 1,850 gallons per day. That would equate to about just under 2 acre feet per year. The well capacity is 80 gallons per minute. The demand is only 1.6% of the project's well capacity. It's not necessary to, and it's not recommended to pump that well at 80 gallons per minute. It's not needed to have that big of a pump on that well. It just doesn't make sense energy wise. The project is proposing 13 days of storage, which would mean that the well would not need to pump even at 15 to 20 gallons per minute because you have that backup storage. So it helps mitigate that peak pumping and that drawdown. The nearest well is over 800 feet away. So when you talk about drawdown, cone of depression and affecting other wells, this well is far enough away that you wouldn't see an impact on other wells. Recharge over the project area, which is just the parcel itself, is sufficient to meet the project's demand in both a wet and a dry year. The project's demand is only 0.1% of the Burns Valley usable storage capacity and only 0.2% of the future demand. So this project itself is just a minor fraction of what's being used in this basin and what could potentially be used in this basin. Next slide.
About 3 more minutes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm almost done.
Good.
So one thing I want to mention, outdated studies were mentioned. Yes, you have to use historical research when you're doing when you're doing any kind of technical study. The most recent groundwater management plan was 2006. I did rely on that for geology and historical reference for this basin. But I did update the demand numbers to reflect what's going on now. So even though it's 2006, these studies reflect current situation. And then the older references, last hearing, multiple folks mentioned using data from the 1960s. What they're referring to are geologic data, which the geologic timeline is on order of millions of years. It's not on the order of decades. So what was relied on from a 1960 Department of Water Resources study was the aquifer storage capacity, which is a geologic scale. It's not something that would change over time. What Department of Water Resources does when they report their Bulletin 118 groundwater study results is they update them periodically. Burns Valley was updated in 2004. If there was a significant geological change, they would have updated the storage capacity, and I don't see that happening for quite a number of years.
1 more minute.
Yep, next slide. So in the Burns Valley groundwater basin, the main sources of groundwater are the alluvium formation, which is in the lower basin, and the deeper formation, which is where this well is located. Long-term monitoring has shown a stable trend in groundwater levels in the deeper formation. The project well is in the deeper formation and that formation provides wells with yields up to hundreds of gallons per minute. Dominant demand in the basin is existing agriculture, which represents 93% of the existing demand. Total cumulative demand, including potential future projects, is 742 acre feet. This represents 53% of the usable storage capacity in the basin. Thus, there is remaining capacity. Next slide. Recharge estimates provided in the hydrology reports for the cannabis projects under review that were in that table all show sufficient recharge to meet those projects' demand during both average and dry years. Based on these facts, the project water use for 2185 Auglin Canyon Road would have little to no impact on surrounding groundwater resources. Running out of breath trying to talk fast. Next slide. There are also project conservation measures that weren't discussed last time. Drip irrigation would be used, which is the least use water method. Shut-off valves and hose pipes, regular inspections. They would minimize water application rates to avoid runoff and waste, which is very common in cannabis cultivation, especially in greenhouses. Mulch would be used to reduce evaporation. Water use monitoring, budgeting, and reporting is required by state license and also the Water Resources Control Board general order permit that this project must comply with. Rooftop rainwater catchment is also an option for this project. This project has the potential to capture about 0.4 acre feet during a dry year and 1.7 acre feet during a wet year. So based on these, again, I make the conclusion that this project would not have a cumulative impact on the lower formation in this basin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hughes, you have a rebuttal to this?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I don't know where you're thinking on the timing. I know that, I just want to mention the applicant did have, Richard Knoll is on Zoom and he was wanting to provide some wrap up, but
Okay, if you can do it in less than 2 minutes, we've got to keep moving.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me? This is Richard Knoll.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I did provide the city with a PowerPoint presentation. It's a little bit more than 2 to 3 minutes, but it's short. So I'll get through it
So is it the same-
quickly.
Is it the same that we saw the last meeting?
No, well, there's a little bit, but it's mostly kind of a wrap up of the project. So the
Please
next
go
slide.
through it fast.
We'll move quickly. Next slide, please. Back in November, the Planning Commission approved the project. The commission independently reviewed the project and determined that the mitigated negative declaration is in compliance with CEQA. And they determined that there was no substantial evidence that the project will have a significant adverse effect on the environment. And they also adopted the mitigation monitoring report. Next slide, please. But backing up a little bit, the city of Clearlake actually produces a guide to commercial cannabis permits and indicates that there are several steps required to obtain a permit for cannabis. The first 3 are to attend a mandatory pre-app. The second one is to identify property zone for commercial cannabis. The third one is to submit the application. I just want to let you know that over a year ago, we had several pre-application meetings with city staff. We got the green light to go ahead. We submitted the completed application with substantial project documentation as detailed on the next slide. We also provided 21 findings of fact documenting compliance with the city's use permit criteria. So the next slide is that list of 24 items, including the application, engineered site plans, preliminary grading plans, storm drainage plans, et cetera, et cetera. We just really provided everything that the city asked for. The next slide, please. As Angie has just indicated, we provided technical memorandums on the groundwater hydrology, which confirm that there's sufficient water to serve the site and that the project will not adversely impact wells in the area.
I think,
next slide, please.
Please move on.
I am, sir.
Information.
The project complies with the City of Clearlake Municipal Code. We provided revised plans as requested by the city addressing additional parking, traffic, odor mitigation, security, and operational details. We have provided all that the city has asked of us. Next slide, please. 2185 Auglin Canyon Road is zoned industrial. It's within the area that the city council has designated for cannabis. Any project proposed for that site is dependent on water, as there is no community water system available.
We are aware of all these things. Please wrap it up.
So I just wanted to finalize by saying we have agreed to the mitigation measures. We have agreed to the use permit conditions. We have agreed to the development agreement provisions. And the final slide is that we ask the city council to consider the facts and the findings, to deny the appeal, and to uphold the planning commission's approval. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. The appellant, Mr. Hughes, do you have a rebuttal to this?
Well, again, I go back to the fact, even though they bought the property and the city knew they wanted to do cannabis, that doesn't automatically entitle them to do what they want to do. They have to go through the process, and part of that process is getting a use permit, maybe even an environmental impact report if it's serious enough. And again, the monitoring well is an example. We don't think it fairly represents our neighborhood. Number one, it's deeper. And if in fact, the way we suspect, if wells are actually working as conduits, taking water from our strata and sending it down, you know, I don't think that fairly represents our immediate area. He mentions the revenue it's going to generate and all this tax money. I mean, is that more important than the residents of Burn Valley? Certainly the city needs revenue. I don't deny that at all. Angie Dodd mentioned vineyards. The vineyard that was probably there in 1985 would be probably the Rutke Vineyard. It's always been dry farmed. The walnuts have been dry farmed. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it certainly means they're not taking the water and irrigating and using it for irrigation. So it's more readily available for the residential uses. I guess that's all I could add, except that, again, we think we need to stop, analyze what's out there, the wells, how they were drilled, how deep they are, where they're perforated. I think the zone of influence is relevant. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Great, thank you. With that, we will now open the continued public hearing on this item. Those wishing to speak will be allotted 3 minutes, and please limit your comments to new comments for the council deliberation and not repeat comments heard on the January 6th meeting. So please come forward, state your name and make your comment. And if you please, if it's similar to the complaint or what the appellant is, please say that you agree with it, and let's move on.
Yeah, I'm not so much presenting, you know, a 3-minute comment. That was, I was actually part of the.
David,
supposed
please
to
get
present.
closer to the microphone.
I'm sorry?
Get closer to the microphone.
Okay. I was actually supposed to present as part of the appellate. And so I'd like to not be held necessarily to that 3 minutes.
Please continue. I mean, if it's the same letter that you wrote, said the last time.
No, this is completely different.
Okay, please. But I will limit you, okay, if it goes
Okay.
on too long.
I want to be clear that our primary concern as a neighborhood is protecting our water and the potential threat to our source of it, that the concentration of agriculture that will be pumping out of the Burns Valley Basin represents. What we would like to see is a win-win-win outcome here. However, the initial study never actually adequately addresses our concerns for the cumulative impacts as defined by CEQA. Even the technical memorandum prepared by the hydrologist laments the fact that there is no current data, that the conclusions are for general assessment, and that given more current information, those conclusions could change. In a quick overview of the initial study environmental checklist under Section 10, Hydrology and Water Quality Impact, Category B, it is rated a 2, which is the second highest impact. Yet they reference the 2006 report data that is outdated and inaccurate regarding the number and types of wells, and makes no effort to consider the impact on existing wells, and concludes that there is adequate water available for the project, as if the project should be considered in isolation. The 1,400 acre-feet available water storage capacity of the aquifer referenced from the 1960 Department of Water Resources best guess projections does not reflect how much of that is actually available to the domestic wells, mostly located within the top 100 feet. Ag wells drawing from the 250 to 450 feet depth may never have water issues, but are nonetheless drawing down the available water for the domestic, the existing domestic wells in the upper part of the aquifer. In section 21, mandatory findings of significance also rated to category B, and this is their question. Does the project have impacts individually limited but cumulatively considerable, defined as incremental effects considering other current projects and probable future projects? And C, does the project have environmental effects which can cause substantial adverse effects on human beings, either directly or indirectly? Both responses indicate that they do not. Both responses indicate if they do the required mitigations previously mentioned in other parts of the checklist, that neither would amount to considerable impacts. But neither response mentions existing water wells or the adjacent neighborhood being considered in any of those proposed mitigations. However, the response to the checklist dated August 10th from the Department of Cannabis Control, it says that substantial factual evidence is needed to support conclusions under CEQA, particularly regarding cumulative impacts. Specifically, they mentioned groundwater diversion effects on the aquifer and impacts on other users. The city responded by saying the general plan EIS addresses those concerns. DCC responded again on September 8th and said the general plan does not apply since it was written prior to the legalization of cannabis, and they will require additional substantial evidence prior to issuing their license to begin operation. It is worth noting.
Are you wrapping it up?
Okay. It's worth noting that the technical memorandum dated the November 9th, it says that there is the potential for the cannabis grows in combination with the cannabis cultivation district, within the cannabis cultivation district, to extract 82 acre-feet of water from the aquifer over the growing season. This calculates to over 26,720,000 gallons annually. And that's almost 148,000 gallons of water a day. So it is misleading to suggest that this project in isolation only represents a minuscule 0.1% of the available water for the entire aquifer, while still consuming over 500,000 gallons per year on its own. This does not offer any consolation to those of us who are already having to choose to let our gardens and fruit trees die and are actually only using minuscule amounts of water ourselves. Even if we presume that the information from 1960 that was repeatedly used to determine the adequacy of the aquifer to support this project is accurate, it remains that 1,400 acre-feet of usable water is only available to whoever has a well extending to the bottom of the aquifer basin. Those wells in the top 100 feet are already in trouble and should not have to be asked to lose access to their water source so a farm or vineyard can have unregulated access to essentially free water. Nothing in the initial study, including all of the support documentation, reflects the current conditions in the Burns Valley Basin. There is no significant well monitoring data or even updated well counts, and no one even bothered to talk to the residents to establish what is happening with the wells in the neighborhood to better inform their conclusion that there is actually enough water available to warrant unlimited access to the aquifer, much less the cumulative impacts from the concentration of cannabis farms adjacent to our neighborhood. Thank you for hearing our concerns, and please vote no on these resolutions.
Thank you. And next piece, please try to keep it under 3 minutes.
Short, sweet, to the point.
Yes.
Water. It's all about the water. My name is Holly Ingalls. I'm a Clearlake resident since 1981. My husband's family settled here in 1856. Mount Baldy right back here. It's named after Balda Smoke, which is a family member of his. My grandparents bought a weekend house in the 70s and retired here in 75. My grandparents always grew a big garden every year. We bought the property from them in 2004. We can't grow a big garden like that. We wouldn't be able to survive. We would have no water. We live on a domestic well. Our pump is set at 111 feet. We went from 106 feet to 111 feet as of October 16th, 17th. On the week of October 11th, our well went dry. We had absolutely no water on the 13th. Have you ever come home from working all day to no water? This is the same week that they broke ground on the new building across the highway. That well is set at 380 feet. They were pumping water into their water tenders, 2 of them. We watched it all day long. Thank God for the weekend and the fact that my husband and I could pull the pump, check the water level, and reset the pump deeper. I don't know if you've ever tried to find a well driller during the summer, but they weren't available for months. It was months out before they could come do anything for us. We haven't been wasteful with our water. We do military style showers. We get wet, we suds up, we rinse off, we get out. We only run dishwasher when it's full. We've been doing these kind of things for years and years. We don't have a pool. We don't have a lawn. We haven't washed our vehicles at home in years. We don't waste water. It's too important. If you want this generation to stick around, we need to have the water. Please vote against these and stop any more permits until you do more research and find out from the residents in the area how they're affected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vicki Crystal, resident of Burns Valley. The council emphasized that you needed compelling information to reject the resolutions before you for this project. I believe Dave, David, and Holly, I had given some compelling information. We prepared a survey and distributed it via email and by walking the neighborhood. We have received 33 surveys back so far as of today. Of those respondents, 19 said that they have been having water shortages and or lost pressure. That is roughly 58%. This occurred primarily in the summer and fall, and most indicated it had been happening for many years, indicating this is not just a drought issue. This represents a significant sample of the neighborhood, and we have every reason to believe that similar issues are being experienced throughout the area where domestic wells exist. Most did not have well logs, but said their wells were 50 to 100 feet deep, but did not know when their wells were drilled. Only 2 indicated that their wells were drilled after 2006. However, it is clear, even though we have yet to get accurate numbers on the new wells since the 2006 reports in the Burns Valley Basin, that almost all of them are new ag wells for vineyards and cannabis. Some of the residents said that they began to notice well problems after the big vineyard on the west side of Highway 53 was planted. No one is irrigating walnuts or pears here, and the egg ranch is likely the only other egg that existed prior to 2006, short of a few cattle and horses. There was overwhelming support for monitoring the wells in the neighborhood, as only 4 said that they would not participate. Even those that were not experiencing well issues shared their concern that they are not immune to water shortages in the future, and that something needed to be done to protect the long-term sustainability of the Burns Valley aquifer. 20 said they had gardens that they harvest for food. 20 said they had gardens that they harvest for food that they, wait, I'm sorry, excuse me. 20 said they had gardens that they harvest for food that they watered, and 22 said they watered yards and landscaping, though others said that they had to quit gardening and let their yards die to conserve water, and a number said that they had to cut back significantly on watering gardens and landscaping. Almost every resident said they conserved water by such measures as reducing flushing toilets, shorter or fewer showers, drip irrigation, cooking water and gray water for watering landscape, planting drought-tolerant landscaping, and adding water storage tanks. I'm almost done. It is clear from this current data that this project has not addressed how the cumulative effect of literally draining millions of gallons of water off the top portion of the aquifer, where the bulk of the domestic wells exist, will further affect the wells that are already being challenged to meet the current demand, nor does it consider how the lives of the residents could be further disrupted with even more extreme water shortages and costs to remedy the loss of water. It is obvious that the residents have tried to do their part to conserve their precious resource. Please do not give permission for commercial interests to extract unlimited amounts of water from resources from the Burns Valley aquifer without having some ability to shut off the valve when the aquifer drops below this sustainable level. We request that the City Council reject the resolutions for a mitigated negative declaration and the use permit, at least until some solution that actually mitigates the concerns we have raised regarding groundwater and the cumulative impacts that the cannabis grows and other ag will have on our water supply. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to address the council? Go ahead. Again, 3 minutes.
Oh, I can do it in one probably.
Okay, well, that's good.
You time me. Barbara Christwitz, I live on Vista Street in Clearlake. And it just seems to me like this project has too much that we're not in consensus. as a community. So I would say until we do, we need to stop. And I would agree with what Vicky had said, that we need to be able to turn off the valve in drought years. I was, my Angie Dodd put my mind at ease for today, but we have predictions in the future that we may have 2 decades of drought, and wells do not regenerate when there's drought after drought after drought. So my thought is we need to eat, we need to drink water. We probably don't need to drink wine and smoke marijuana. So if we have to choose, let's limit, let's make it so that we can eat and drink water. So I once again, I say, hold off until and unless we can get some mitigation and a promise that the valve would be turned off if things got too low. So
Thank you.
thanks.
Again, try to keep it under 3.
It'll be quick.
Good.
Good evening. My name is Ken Ling. I live in the Burns Valley area. I'm here to express my concern over the hydrology report used by the applicant. I'm concerned the report does not reflect current conditions. We've seen a significant reduction in rainfall over the past 15 years. The hydrology report identifies rainfall as the primary makeup source for the aquifer. So I would request that the city, the request of the applicant provide for additional monitoring of domestic water wells in the Burns Valley area. Participation in this monitoring would show good faith both on the part of the city and the applicant. If the project does in fact present minimal impact to the aquifer, then additional monitoring will validate that claim. It will also provide valuable information for permitting of any future commercial projects in the area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Denise Lustelo. I'm not quite as technical, guys. So I just wanted to say the vineyard that everybody's speaking of behind my house, it was there when I moved in. So I had that under consideration already. I knew about that. Everything else since has just been one after the other, after the other, after the other. So I can say for the vineyard, they start their wells pumping in about February, 24/7, 7 days a week. Large pumps. They fill their ponds for their grapes. Like I said, that was there. It's already happening. But what about all the new things now? And I'm very sorry that this project has been the one that has sparked all this controversy. Should have been sparked a long time ago. We have been told for decades and decades about the water issues in California. So it doesn't matter what we're planting. Cannabis, hops, daffodils, it doesn't matter. The point of it is it's impacting people and it's impacting the quality of life. And from sitting up there with you, I know about revenue. I get that. But I also know that our first job is quality of life for our citizens. So a lot's happened since '06. And if we're going to base everything on '06 studies, it's time to pump the brakes and start something new and get some fresh ideas, some fresh knowledge, some fresh studies. That's all.
How you guys doing? My name is Sean Heap. I reside at 2895 Old Highway 53. I want to applaud the people here. First and foremost, none of us in my community are here to stop business from progress. I'm part of progress. I'm a vice president of a union. I bring tons of jobs. I pay over 100 grand a year into this community. This year alone, we brought 5 just here alone. And where I work at is AT&T. We brought 1,100 to the state. I'm about progress. I'm about work. But what I'm not about is losing my water. I've already lost water 3 times this year. I've learned a lot about that, right? I've had to turn it from full blast when we just bought the house to a quarter. 2 people flush the toilet at one time. Someone's in the shower. I have no water. It takes about 15 minutes for my little 40-gallon tank to get repressurized. I'm not a technical person, and that I could tell you a lot about phones, tell you a lot about unions and organizing that work that they want to bring here. But what I can't tell you about is all the nice stuff that lady had sent about the water. But when I look at that picture right there and I go out here, it doesn't look like that. Does not look like that. Our water has dissipated. Our lake shows it. Lake Mendocino shows it. All of our lakes show it. What we can't see and what we don't have is a study. It's 2006. What I'm asking for is for you to take into consideration what all my neighborhood is saying, the community that does reside here, does work here, pays taxes here, and just take a look at that study. And then if we're wrong, we're wrong. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Frank Barczyk. I live in Burns Valley, probably in line with him from the project. I have a well. It's got an advanced pump and it's constant pressure, so it monitors itself. And what I've found out when I first put it in, it was in 1998. There were no vineyards north of us. There were no vineyards east of us at that time. And I could pump 2 3/4 inch hoses, which is about 20 gallons a minute, which is what the well driller told me I could get for over 4 hours without any problems whatsoever. The well's 100 feet deep. The pump's about 95 feet. And the last couple of years, the year before, it seemed like it was late summer that it would start shutting off automatically because it detected the water table got down below the pump and started sucking air. It will do that. Shuts off for 3 minutes, fires back up, and then refills the tank. So this year, or 2021, through most of the spring and summer, I'm do drip system irrigation around there through one little 1/2 inch pipe. And the pump runs around half hour, 35 minutes, shuts off. 3 minutes, it starts up, and then it's 5 to 6 minutes. I timed it. So I'm probably only getting about 30% recovery out of that well that I used to get when I first got it. We have vineyards to the east of us now. It's some many acres up there. The vineyards to the north, incredible. They keep growing and growing every year. And now we're adding this project on here. It's got to attenuate at some point in time because the ground's not level. You don't get the water in, all year long. Like she said, it comes in winter and spring. And then in the summertime, we basically use what it is. With all the new ag wells in here that are perforated, we're draining the water in from the upper aquifer to the bottom one to sustain them while our wells go dry. And I think that we have to put a lid on this pretty soon, and I hope you deny this project. Thank you.
Any more in the audience want to address the council? If not, we'll go to any people in Zoom land that want to comment on this, Madam Clerk.
There are 2 hands raised within the Zoom, Mr. Mayor. The first is a Kathy. Go ahead. Kathy, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. Hi, my name's Kathy. I was here at the last meeting. I will not go through what we went through last time, and I appreciate you being available for this meeting tonight. I think it's really important. I'd like to just reiterate the fact, as the gentleman talked about that beautiful picture behind you. I have family members that work for 2 different water companies right here in Clearlake. They've had to extend their water pipes out. 2 of them have, from each of those, have had to extend their water pipes out because of the water systems. The water in our lake is not as much as it used to be. I lived for 28 years out there on the lake, and I can see the difference in the water. There's just not the same amount of water. The thing that I want to really kind of focus on is the fact that they did a great job in presenting their part of what they want to try to do. But what they're not grasping is the fact of Water is everything to the people in this community. It's always been everything to the people in this community. And when with the evidence that's been given to you guys tonight, we can't forget the fact that dry years mean something totally different than severe drought, which we have been under. The state of California is constantly bringing to our attention severe drought. It doesn't look too promising in the future either if you go and you look at the reports of what they're expecting to come. So I'm not going to take up a lot of your time. I just want you to think about the fact that our water systems here have had to keep extending the water pipes out to do the municipal waters. And that in itself should tell you something. So the people that are on the wells, they don't get to interchange like the different water companies can, the way that they're developed, they can switch from one water company to the other to keep helping keep the water flow going for the people in the city. So please really consider the fact that this project, even though they want to pretend that it's a small project, it's still a lot when you look at the scheme of things. So thank you for listening to me. And please vote no on this. We need more information. We need more data. And people's lives really are at stake in this. So thank you.
Thank you. Next person on Zoom.
The next person is Aaron. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Erin McCarrick. Thank you so much, council members and all of our community for this conversation. It's a very important conversation. And since the legalization of industrial cannabis, commercial cannabis, these conversations have been there. It's also part of a much broader conversation. As we hear everybody talk about the water usage issues, seems like it's been going on for quite some time. And the fact that cannabis are public hearings to get a use permit as opposed to just a business permit forces ourselves and the public to look at this and our elected officials to look at water usage. And it enables us to look at water usage as a whole. So as we look at these cannabis projects, we should also look at all the other projects that are happening within the city of Clearlake to ensure that water usage is there down the line. This forces us to look at ways to do water conservation, water monitoring, and look at it as a whole. As people have said, we need to look to the future, and that's very important. But we also need to make sure that it's not just these projects. If we're going to shut off the pump to a cannabis project, do we also have the ability to shut off a pump to the wineries or to other projects that are also here and also consuming water? Are we able to look at metering all the businesses to make sure there's no leaky faucets, to make sure there's no, breaks in the pipe? These are really good things that we can look at. And so this is all constructive conversation. I would also ask the council to consider and the public to consider that there are other elements of cannabis production in this proposal: processing and retail delivery. So if we're looking at that, that is the same on par as many other businesses being developed in the city of Clearlake. Are we also looking at the water usage of those other companies as well? I think we should. I think it's fantastic to be able to have a public conversation about water usage and monitoring and conservation. Without any of this, there's no business, no resident, no future for the city and the county. So I thank you for your time, and I urge you to look at the broader picture of this conversation.
Thank you. Any additional people on Zoom, Madam Clerk?
There are no further hands raised within Zoom. Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
we did receive an emailed comment, which I can read when you're
Yeah,
ready.
please. I think I received that too.
The emailed comment comes from Cheryl Sullivan. And one moment, she writes, I'm writing regarding the 2185 Auglin Canyon cannabis development. I am deeply concerned with the water situation with this project. I strongly urge you to put a hold on all cannabis development in the Auglin Canyon Road area until a further study of the cumulative water impact on the Burns Valley residents is done. In the current 2006 hydrology report, only the 2185 Auglin Canyon Road development is addressed. It does not take into account the vineyards or other cannabis grows surrounding this project. All of these agricultural endeavors draw from the Burns Valley aquifer. From my own experience, having lived in Burns Valley since 1985 and having a well since about 1983, I can say that these projects have had an impact on water levels. Our flow of water has steadily decreased. We have let our lawn die, do not plant a garden anymore, flush the toilets only a few times a day, buy water to drink, and have installed a 2,500 gallon water storage tank in order to keep our well recharging. If the Burns Valley aquifer dries up or collapses, it will be a huge hardship for all the Burns Valley residents who rely on their wells for basic water needs. Should this project continue to be approved, I have 3 questions for the City Council. Who in the city will be responsible for monitoring the cannabis water use during droughts? The current cannabis project under consideration has stated that they will cut their water use during a drought. Will they rely on the state to declare a drought? How much less water does this project intend to pump during a drought? And what is the city's plan for Burns Valley residents if the aquifer collapses or goes dry? Again, I urge the council members to look to the future of the residents and the city and plan accordingly. Please put a hold on cannabis water use.
Great. I think this will conclude the public hearing on it. And I have, let's ask if the council has comments or questions. Go ahead, Councilman Kramer.
Several questions, but one specifically for Dr. Dodd. You mentioned, and this is in reference to the zone of influence. What have you found typically around the well that's the zone? Go ahead, come up here. What is the zone of influence around a well in general?
For an individual well, it really depends on quite a number of factors. It depends on the transmissivity of the well. If you have a really low transmissivity, you won't have as you pump, it won't affect further out. Usually in a well of this type and this capacity, I would expect it's really not a zone of influence. It's a cone of depression, and it's the drawdown around the well and how far out that drawdown actually goes. And in a well of this type, I would expect that on the order of a few feet up to about 20 to 50 feet. So
20 to 50 feet?
Yeah, if it was pumped at full capacity.
So let me understand this correctly. How close to the well that is on this property would you think you could safely drill another well?
I normally would recommend at least 100, depending. I do a full step drawdown test, but I would definitely try for 100 feet away from that well. Up in Humboldt, I'm on the water district board, and we're about to drill another well without similar information, and we're a minimum of 100 feet away from our existing well.
Okay, and those are deep wells or?
Yes,
wells?
they're deep wells.
What about a shallow well, would you?
Shallow well, it just, really you're talking, it depends on the condition and the situation. Again, I think it's safe to keep them 100 feet apart, but if you're concerned with wells going dry, and there are a lot of reasons why wells go dry, it could be the condition of the well. In this case, what I'm hearing is that there's a larger problem than in the deeper aquifer. What you have going on here is you have the Burns Valley watershed filling up the alluvial aquifer. It drains into the deeper formation. So you're not really pulling water from the alluvial aquifer. What's happened here is it sounds like the alluvial aquifer, because we're as everyone said, we're in severe drought, has lost water. And so wells have to go deeper and deeper because that bathtub kind of thing that happens with groundwater, it's been drained. And so that's why you see the more prolific, deeper wells, and you're experiencing the less prolific, shallower wells.
So the well, this well on this property is, again, I forget how deep it was, but it's in that lower lake formation.
Yes, it's over 275. It's screened at over 275 feet,
Where do the screens start?
at 275 below ground surface to 300 and something.
300
Yeah.
something, and above that, there's no screening,
No.
perforations.
No,
And what is your opinion as to cone or dropping down the well, the gravel pack around the,
what do you mean? How
how much would that upper water conceivably be, in your opinion?
in the alluvial aquifer going into this
would-
deep
would
formation?
Go down that hole.
I don't think it would be affected. You're up in the upper watershed outside of that alluvial aquifer in this case,
Okay,
according to the geologic map.
okay. And there's about 100 acres of that 150 are dryland walnuts right now, and the other 50 are probably in yards that are being irrigated as yards, residential. Just
I
to
would assume
clarify
so,
that
yeah.
point. Okay, and then you're saying the nearest well to your well is 800 feet away?
Yeah, I just did a quick look and I didn't see anything within an 800-foot radius.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dodd.
Yeah, and can I point out one thing? The Department of Water Resources well mapper that shows all the most recent wells that have been drilled. It's probably current up to probably mid-end of 2021.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The map of all the number of wells in the basin is from the Department of Water Resources Groundwater Well Mapper. And that's pretty much up to date to around fall 2021.
How many of those are residential wells, do you know?
I'd have to go through it. The majority in the lower basin are residential wells. The ag wells are in the upper portion and they're all deeper wells.
That would be the vineyard area and the cannabis up Auglin Canyon,
Correct,
and the vineyard, of course, on the side hill to the south.
correct.
Okay. Has there been any deep wells drilled down in the valley itself?
I'd have to look at them each individually. The average depth was about 94 feet. I'm the monitoring well, I think, is at 170 feet. So that one is deeper.
Yeah, that's it's an old orchard there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Councilwoman Overton.
Okay, so I'm kind of disappointed in you guys not being at the planning commission when this all started. So just to let you know that. So here's a question. On Ed Roby had mentioned about a plan that they did for the vineyard in his district when he was supervisor about having the wells monitored. Is there something that we can do to put that into this development agreement to that if it hits a certain point, that they would have to somehow do something different with their water?
Well, I think, yeah.
I'm just asking the question.
That probably could happen. And correct me if I'm misstating this, but so monitoring of water drawn from the well is already required both by city use permit condition and the state.
Right.
I think what Mr. Rowe was talking about would be monitoring the level of the water in the aquifer, I guess, which isn't something that's required. I mean, I think probably that could be done. I don't know how to create some threshold of how much water drop there is, and then that triggers some other type of action. But that's something we could talk about and see, I guess, if the applicant was interested in or willing to do it.
Right, because I'm thinking if they did that for the vineyard, there must have been, either monitoring other wells to see what their water levels went to. And at some certain point, he said then they would have to, stop using the water for whatever the period, but we should be able to get that information from the county, I would think, if they had that in their agreement. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a water engineer. I don't know if it would be relevant in this particular case, but it would be perhaps a template, I guess.
But no offense, guys, it does seem to me like some of your wells are old and they might need to be maintained. And I mean, I've lived off of wells most of my life when I was growing up. And I mean, there's always problems with wells, pressure and all of that stuff. And the water levels change whether there's anybody around or not. But, I think if we could figure out a way to monitor, even pick some wells that are, in the area and monitor the levels that they are now compared to a water level that they would be in the future if they see there's problems, is it caused from this particular, growth? I don't know if we can do that or not, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, I mean,
Councilman Claffey has some.
Dr. Dodd, may I just ask a couple more questions of you? So in your estimate, orchards, based on the numbers here, take up a significant amount of water per the space they take up, correct? You've heard anecdotally that a lot of those are not being irrigated at this time. I guess my question is, so if that's the case, your potential demand is somewhat inflated, right?
Correct.
Okay. So even taking in your inflated potential demand into account, we've had a very dry year. How many dry years in succession would we need to have before, as some have said, the aquifer would collapse or at least become so dry it gets to a critical level?
To collapse, well, when you look at, so I calculated the recharge for the project itself and not for the entire watershed. So in terms of the project itself, even during a dry year over its 21.3 acre parcel size, it has sufficient recharge during a dry year.
Mhm.
So theoretically for the project, it would recharge its water during multiple dry years. If you have for the entire basin and the water use in the alluvial aquifer, which is where the challenge is right now, we had a very dry year in 2020, and then we had a very dry year, not as dry, but a dry year in 2021. That's why Lake County was considered in a severe drought. In the past, Lake County wasn't always considered a severe drought, even though the rest of the state was. Portions of it has been. This last 2 years, definitely. And I think that's seriously what folks are experiencing in the alluvial aquifer. I think what we're seeing here and hearing from everybody is something that's part of a larger problem that needs to be solved. I think folks need help with their wells. I think they need help with inspecting their wells and possibly refurbishing them, help with maybe drilling deeper wells, maybe consideration of connecting to the adjacent water company. I think this is part of you're hearing that this is part of a larger problem. There are a lot of people here that are concerned about their wells. Water is life. I understand all of that. But when you now talk about wells in the deeper formation, everything I've heard is that the vineyards were pumping massive amounts of water into ponds, which are showing that there's a lot of water that they're still pulling out, even though these guys are experiencing dry wells. It's because that deeper formation has been able to fill up longer. You may see over time that deeper formation could also, if we continue getting extreme drought years, that's a whole different scenario. And that's a projection into the future that is difficult to say at this time. When you look at the average precipitation over time in Lake County, if you look at the overall trend, I don't see a decreasing trend in precipitation at this time. You can pick out which some folks have had periods of time and look at those averages and see a trend. But you can do that with any data set, but I don't see a significant decreasing trend in precipitation in Lake County to justify that's going to continue over the long term. And same with climate change. We really don't, the official direction is unknown. I think we're talking policy. I think we're talking solutions for residents now. It's not an individual project, I think, that's being talked about tonight. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
It did. We got
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman, Vice Mayor Purdock, you have any questions? Okay, I have basically one. Dr. Dodds, could you please come up?
Might as well put your
Sorry about that.
chair there.
You are the expert on this, right?
Yes.
So the way I understand it, there's like an aquifer about 100 feet down, which is what you call the alluvial one. Is that
Yes.
correct? But this well and most of the ag wells are in a deeper aquifer.
Correct.
Is there a transfer of water between the alluvial and the deeper?
Well, the alluvial would transfer down to the
Yeah.
deeper aquifer.
Right, is that impacted by drilling your well or other wells?
Into the deeper,
Yes.
you mean in terms of connection from the alluvial
Right.
to the deeper? If you have a well that has multiple perforations. So for example, if you have a well that has perforations at the shallow, some wells do have perforations at multiple depths. So if you have a perforation at a shallower depth, that could be in the alluvial aquifer. And then at the deeper depth, then you could have some connection for the well we're talking about. It's only in the deeper port. It's very deep.
So the existing well, does that have that transfer capability or?
Not this one, not that I'm aware of.
All right. Sorry, the public hearing is closed.
Okay.
No. No, that's procedure, sir. All right. It's time to, Mr. City Manager, have any words of wisdom here?
Well, I don't know if I would go so far as to say words of wisdom, but I think that, we weren't aware, the city wasn't aware that there was a significant water problem in the Burns Valley area until this project came up. It sounds like there's concerns from a number of residents, and I don't, from staff perspective, we don't want to diminish that. I mean, we believe that the basis for the project and the information that was provided by the applicant is sound and clearly shows that there's available water for this project. And, we've been talking about kind of what may be going on with some of the wells. I mean, there's some things that we can do to help try to address that problem with some of the drought resources that are available and so forth. And maybe we need to look into that. But there was a couple of mentions about the larger context of this area, and you have, it is a rural area, but there's still a fairly high concentration of population, residential and agricultural, that all rely on groundwater, and there's no municipal system, right? I think that's part of the problem here. And then the city has created a situation where we have zoned, the council has wanted industrial land. So we've zoned a pretty large area for industrial use. And then more recently, it was zoned for cannabis use, with the knowledge that this was all going to be done with no municipal water system. And so here we are, there's kind of this conflict, and there's some issues that I think we need to take a longer term approach on. I mean, one thing that we need to do over the long term, which is difficult for the city because we don't control water utilities, but there needs to be municipal water to this industrial area. But the conflict that you have now is you have an applicant that's followed all the rules, and at least from our perspective has proven that there's more than adequate water supply available. And so what are their land use rights moving forward?
Okay. If somebody wants to entertain a motion?
Well, I'd like to make a couple of comments. Okay. This has been a really emotional time. You all are neighbors and most of your friends. I'm on a well just as you are. Fortunately, I haven't had the well problems. My well is 110 feet deep. More than that though, I farmed for years. We've got wells on our farm. When we drilled wells, we've talked to well drillers. The reason I asked Dr. Dodd about the influence, the distance from it, and specifically how far would she say there, how close should a well be to another well for an ag use? And the well drillers I've talked to basically said what she just said, 100 to 200 feet. And that was always the rule of thumb that we've used. This property, I get it that Burns Valley Basin is, we're all on shallower wells. Growing up, I've always had wells for water, and sometimes things happen to wells that they go dry. I don't see any, in looking at the evidence here, listening to Dr. Dodd, listening to all of you, I'm not convinced that the well on this particular project is going to have any influence, let alone significant influence on the wells down in the valley. However, I do agree that going forward, we need to do more monitoring of the wells. As Mr. Flora just said, perhaps we need to do some, find some ways to help those residential users that where their wells are now encountering difficulties that they haven't in the past. I'm up to all those things. I'd like to see more monitoring of wells, as we don't know what we don't know. But I do know from my own farming experience and listening to what Dr. Dodd just said, has not changed my mind on that. This project was approved, went through planning. There was nobody at the planning meeting that I'm aware of that had anything to say. You've all said that, we get it, that we're looking for revenue. That's not it at all. I didn't give one thought to potential revenue from this project when I'm thinking about whether it should go on or not. Your arguments are based on water use, and that's what I looked at. I read Dr. Dodd's reports 3 or 4 times. I thought of my own experience, both in Burns Valley and in farming and in irrigation in general. I just can't support your stance. No, that's all I have to say.
Good. Vice Mayor Purdock has an additional comment or question.
Well, to save time, I want to echo what Councilman Kramer just shared. I feel the same. But I also want to ask one of the members who surprisingly didn't speak tonight. And that is that, this area borders into the county, and the county has been doing a lot of growth, a lot of permitting of this cannabis. And I do think we need to monitor. I do think we need to pay more attention to our water, the water rights, and all those impacted. So I would ask Supervisor Sabatier, who's with us tonight, to take those things into consideration, to bring that back to the county, because those vineyards and those other grows that are out that I think do also feed off the same aquifer and water system should be considered and monitored as well.
All right. Anybody last comments? Councilman Claffey, Councilwoman Overton? If not, I entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion to adopt resolution number CC 2022-03 and read it by title only, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Clearlake denying the appeal application AP 2021-04 and uphold the Planning Commissioner's approval of conditional use permit application CUP 2021-05 through CUP 2021-08. Do I need to read all this? Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilwoman Overton and a second by Councilman Claffey. Let's see.
Once again, my electronic voting thing is failing me.
Did you refresh it?
I can't get to it. That was to deny the.
Okay, Madam Clerk, could you read the results of the vote?
The motion passes with all votes unanimously in favor.
All right, with that, we'll take a 10-minute break. Item number
13.
13, consideration of ordinance number 258-2022, approving a development agreement DA 2021-04 for Auglin Canyon Holdings LLC to allow cannabis operation located at 2185 Auglin Canyon Road, Clearlake, California. Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So as have been through multiple times before, this is a development agreement associated with the project that was just discussed at on Auglin Road. So the municipal code requires any cannabis projects before they're effective, a development agreement to also be approved, which outlines a number of things, including payment of some development fees to the city. So this is the same template that we've used on all the previous projects. With that, I just address any specific questions that the council may have.
Questions for staff? If not, we open it to the public. Do we have any comments from public? Huh? The applicant maybe wants to say a couple of words or? Okay. I don't know. If not, we open the meeting to the public. Any public comments here? Any public comments on Zoom, Madam Clerk?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
It would take it back to the council. I have a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 258-2022, and I'm going to have to put my glasses on. Approving a development agreement DA 2021-04 for Ogden Canyon Holdings LLC to allow a cannabis operation located at 2185 Ogden Canyon Road, Clearlake, California, 95422.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Kramer and a second by Councilwoman Overton. Go to our vote. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, the vote is unanimous in favor of first reading.
I miss saying aye.
All right, we go to the last item on our agenda, which is new business is review and approve submittal for fiscal year 2023 ROPS for the period of July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Mr. City Manager, could you report on?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. So this is an annual requirement of just make clear that this action would be taken as the Board of Directors of the successor agency of the Clearlake Redevelopment Agency. So every year at this time, the successor agency is required to approve a ROPS for the upcoming fiscal year, which ROPS is Recognized Obligation Payment Schedule. So this is payment of all the existing obligations of the former redevelopment agency. So this is similar to everything that's been approved in previous years. There's an existing bond payment, which is the most significant expense associated with the former redevelopment agency, a little under $1 million a year, and then some other various expenses that are allowable for maintenance of properties and some consultant reports that are required and so forth. The only really significant change this year is we did bump up the expense for maintenance of properties. So we recently completed vegetation abatement on almost all city and redevelopment agency owned properties throughout the city. And we have a contract in place for annual upkeep of those. And so we bumped that up a little bit to cover the cost of that, but otherwise the expenses are similar to previous years. And so next week, the countywide oversight board, which has final approval of these expenses, subject to review of the State Department of Finance, will be meeting, and we'll be presenting that to them. So try to address any questions that the council or the board of directors may have related to this item.
Do you have any questions as board
No.
of directors? Council, if not, we open the public hearing. We have any comments from the public here or in Zoom land? Madam Clerk?
There are no hands raised in the Zoom meeting, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll take it back to the council. Can I have a motion for this item?
Mayor, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the submittal of the 2022-2023 ROPS for the period July 1st through 2022 through June 30th, 2023, and approve for our administrator to, or our city manager to sign.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilwoman Overton and a second by Vice Mayor Hurtado. And we vote as the successor agency on this.
That's correct.
Voting's not open.
Huh? Voting is not open yet because our vote opener is
Busy. Ruh-roh.
Mr. Mayor, can you clarify who seconded that motion, please?
I did.
Councilwoman, Councilwoman Overton made the motion and it was seconded by Vice Mayor Hurtado as the successor board.
Thank you. Motion passes with a unanimous vote of the council.
All right, we go to city manager and council member reports.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, a few items. Earlier this afternoon, we received our quarterly sales tax update and haven't dug through 100% of the numbers, but so this is final reports for third quarter, which is July through September of last year. We've definitely seen a slowing of the very significant year-over-year growth that we saw kind of over the last year and a half. But things are still going well. It's just kind of back to normal growth. The good news is that currently their projections have been updated since when we adopted our budget, and we're well under what the current projections are, which likely, if everything's staying the same, may even be a little bit conservative. But for example, in the general fund, probably a couple of $100,000 more in revenue than what was initially budgeted. So overall, things going well. Just wanted to give you that report. Of course, you've probably all seen this, but we're pleased with the results of the redistricting process for the city of Clearlake and Lake County. Able to, at this point at least, remain in the Assembly and Senate districts that we're currently represented by, and Lake County is again rejoined in the same congressional district. We're working on a lot of grants right now. We have quite a few that are due by the end of this month, so we're finishing up the multifamily housing grant process through CDBG. And so there's 2 applications for that funding, one for the housing project on Burns Valley as part of the development we're working on there. And then also the project on 18th Avenue over by the hospital. We're working on phase 2 of the DR infrastructure projects. This is the remaining funds from the Sulphur Fire Road Rehab project. So there's 2 other projects that we'll be asking to commit about $5 million of remaining funds for, which will be renovation of Arrowhead Burns Valley Road all the way out here at the end down to Olympic Drive. And then in addition, we're asking for funds to rehab the remainder of Lakeshore Drive. So the Sulphur Fire project is starting here at City Hall, going north to the city limits. This one will go from City Hall out to Highway 53. And this is, we're hoping to combine this with the project. We are soliciting design proposals currently for the Lakeshore Drive corridor and pedestrian improvements and all that type of thing. And so we'll have to identify some funding to do the curb gutter, sidewalk, street trees, and so forth. But we should be able to time this funding with that same project and cover the actual grind and overlay of the street. So that'll be nice. And then there's some other disaster recovery related grants, which we applied for several initially, but we were awarded funding for 2 of them. One being a code enforcement program, and the other is a citywide stormwater management plan. And so with the 37-step process that we have to go through with HCD, even though we're basically granted the funding, now we have to do the formal application process, which is what's due by the end of the month. We were unsuccessful in our latest bid for funding for Highlands Park. So this is the second funding source we've applied for that hasn't been successful. I won't get into all the details now, but I did have a conversation. Our grant writer and myself talked to our representative at the state of California. There's a lot of things that they liked about our application. We have a little bit of insight on what we could do better, and they really encourage us to keep the project the way it is and apply when some additional funding becomes available. We did, I think the actual grant agreements came in this week, but there's a smaller grant through state parks where we received about $180,000, which we're going to use for installation of the aeration system and bubble curtain out here on Austin Beach. That one we should be able to move through relatively quickly. So we're planning to hopefully begin installation of that relatively soon. We have the bids and all that stuff's been done. They're just waiting on us. And that's a nice one because we did have some funding budgeted for it for the project. And so because almost all of it will be covered with this grant, we'll be able to shift that into other projects in the park. We did apply for a state parks grant for the Burns Valley Sports Complex, and this includes the outdoor field. So that application was submitted a couple of weeks ago. I think right at $3 million. And then we're in the process of applying for some additional funding for that project through the Economic Development Administration for the sports complex and rec center. And that's also due at the end of this month. And then the last one, here's a Caltrans grant that you may have seen some information about. This is a Clean California grant. So we're applying for a number of things in partnership with the Rural Arts Initiative, CC4C, but it's going to include kind of a number of things, but a lot of new signage, both on Highway 53, identifying the city of Clearlake, and then some upgraded wayfinding signage around town. So, and the designs on that were part of the work that Downtown Strategies did for us. So we have some pretty cool retro themed new signs for the city, which will be exciting. Related to the cash fire, there's only a few properties remaining to be abated. I think the only ones really left are a small number that we weren't able to get right of entry forms for, and so we had to do summary abatement. They left for a while that process was done, but they're out there again, and they're expecting cleanup to be 100% complete as early as February 7th. And while most of the people that this is a reflection of aren't in this room, Cal OES, there's at least weekly statewide calls with all of the jurisdictions that have been impacted by the wildfires this year, of which of course we're a part of, and we're the only city that's actually involved, because it's absolutely unheard of really that a city is doing this on our own. But we were called out by Cal OES as the model of disaster response this year. And so I'm really proud of all the people on our team that have made that happen. And probably the best example of that is been Finance Director Young's leadership in putting all this together. So the phase one of kind of the Burns Valley project, which mainly includes the portions of the public works yard, is out to bid. Bid opening is going to be January 27th. So we're excited about getting that project moving. We're expecting to have a bid award on the February 3rd council meeting. You may have noticed we installed some additional lighting along the Austin Park Promenade. This is something that we're kind of trying out, which is solar powered lighting. But it looks a lot better than the ones that have the big panels on them. The pole itself is encased in a solar panel that's wrapped around it. So if you get a chance, check those out. We're hoping that there's various models of it, but it may be a good way for us to add additional lighting around town without having to add electrical infrastructure, just a foundation.
So no interface, no connection to PG&E?
None.
That's good. I like that.
But they don't match the rest of the stuff, the design in the park perfectly, but they're pretty close. So anyway, make sure you check those out and see what you think.
Effective for the energy they're saving? Are they cost effective for the energy?
They're very cost effective. I think they're like less than $7,000 a piece or something. They're very comparable to what it would cost for a regular light. So I mentioned the Lakeshore Drive design RFP that should be coming in the end of this month. I can't remember the date. We're expecting the splash pad bids to go out on February 3rd. Extremely excited about that getting going. And then I think we should be sending out the second MODOC project in sometime in February. And the final thing I wanted to add, I mentioned the residential project at Burns Valley with Danco, and they submitted their building permit for that project last week. And so they're tearing through it, loving how aggressive they are in moving that project forward. So
That's the 29 acres.
no, that's the 80 units on the near the sports complex. The 29 acre property is still, that deal hasn't become official because it has to be approved by the oversight board because it's a redevelopment agency property. And so we've been waiting on the meeting that will happen next week, and that will be considered by the oversight board. And then we can go forward at that time, and they can submit their tentative map and move forward.
Another Burns Valley project.
Although that one will be on municipal water served by Highlands Water District.
All right. Is that it?
Yeah, that's my report.
Councilman Kramer, you did anything exciting?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't know how exciting. Had a couple of meetings of various things that I'm on, but did meet on a conference call hosted by Supervisor Spatier with BLM and CAL FIRE to talk about phase 2 of the Davis Street project. That would be the project that was done last summer to widen a fire break going down the ridge from above the dumps, clear down to the bottom into private property actually owned by my family. Phase 2, they're looking at doing, actually going over to the next ridge over and it comes to a point at the top and doing the same thing down it. It'll be more complicated because the portion that's in the BLM is in a wilderness area. So it's kind of I guess they're charting new waters here. But one of the BLM person that's heading this feels really pretty confident that they're going to be able to get it done. And what they'll do is if that gets done, we'll have 2 wide fire breaks down 2 ridges that come to a point at the top. And then CAL FIRE stepped in, their representative, Tom Neck, and said, well, what CAL FIRE could do would be to help go across the bottom of that apex, that inverted V, and actually make it a triangle to have a clear area all the way around this piece. And then BLM is going through the NEPA process right now to be able to get permission to do prescribed burns on that wide area. When it gets done, it'll add a tremendous amount of protection for the city of Clearlake from fire from the east. The area that they're looking to burn is populated by brush that hasn't burned since 1967, so it'll make a huge difference. Second thing, also fire related, I was going out to look at the project out on Davis Street, going out Dam Road. Noticed that piles are being burned by CAL FIRE on the Rhodey property, so they're making really good progress on that, which I thought that was great. Oh, and by the way, congratulations on the grant for the Austin's bubble curtain. I think that's great, and if I heard you correctly, that'll free up some funds to go to Highlands Park.
Well, we expect to probably use for some additional upgrades in Austin Park, like Director Goodman's been working on some lighting for the tennis courts and different things like that. So,
well, at any rate, it'll gives us we can do more. And then last, I accepted. I was voted on to the Clearlake Chamber Board last week, so I'm a member of the Clearlake Chamber of Commerce Board now. That's all I have.
All right. Councilman Claffey. Exciting.
We had our first marketing committee meeting for 2022 and kicked off hopefully a 6-month targeted marketing campaign to bring in at least one or multiple event organizers to the area. Very excited. I think we have a good group on the marketing committee this year, and I think this is a good first project for us. So that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilwoman Overton.
To add to that, I want to really thank our council member, David, who of course is always so critiqued on everything that he does. He does a great job on running that and giving some really good directions to that board on or that committee on things. So I really want to thank you for that. You do a great job there, and we are lucky to have you on that board. The next 6 months on that is, I think we're going to be bringing back some stuff here to show the council, what we feel might be a good direction, and focusing more on the marketing aspects instead of what we were doing, the event stuff, but that's not our job. We really need to start on the marketing part of it. So David has put together a very good plan, and I can't wait to get it done and bring it back. So side of that. So next week, remember that on Thursday is the pit count that's our homeless count. So anybody, of course, wants to help with that. They're always looking for help, but really try to pass the word around to people to make sure that they, if they know anybody that's homeless, that they really make sure that they get to one of the places in Clearlake. I believe the college is having one this year, so that was really good that they're having it up there, because a lot of those people that are going to college really are homeless. So so I really ask that you guys push that. The relief program, which we said they were going to provide us some trees and some fruit trees. are wanting to install next Thursday and Friday. So if anybody wants to help with that, that's going to beautify up our community center there. I think it's going to be a really great look for us once those really start growing, to have the trees around the surrounding property all the way around. And then they're going to put some fruit trees back in the community garden for the public use. So I'm really excited about that. Kind of wondering about the water situation. So you and I need to talk. Happy to say that
You have a well there, right?
we do have a well, but it's getting everything
well.
put in place for the system.
Irrigation well there.
Yeah. Well, we need an irrigation system. I need the system that goes with it. So we need the system that goes with it. But we'll talk about that. And I'm happy to say that we have some new members to the Highland Senior Center board. I think we've got a really good board there now. I think they're really anxious to help with keeping the community center, also as a community center, just not a senior center. So I am looking forward to working with them. And we have one young one is also into marketing and everything. So you'll be seeing our website will be updated and Facebook and stuff, because I think with the extra help, we'll be able to keep that up. Poor David, we wear him out here. So but he's good. Got us ready to go on it. So after a little bit of training, I think we'll be able to kind of advertise the community center more and try to get more people to renting it and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to my board helping the city, make those accomplishments too. And I believe that's it.
All right, Vice Mayor Purdock.
I attended as the alternate, the LAFCO meeting. You took care of most of the business before you left. And I'll let you cover what that was. That was all I did.
Yes, I did attend the first 15 minutes of the LAFCO meeting. And I think most of the business was done in that. We're still talking at LAFCO, the effect that the 3 city water districts are unable to provide sufficient fire flow and are very expensive. So after that, when I pulled out of the meeting, we had a virtual press conference with Senator McGuire about the project where the state gave the armory to the county, and where the county gave the piece of property on 18th Street back to the state, and where it was basically a cooperation between the state agencies, general services, I forget who all was involved, the county and the city. So they're supposed to be putting things together and maybe even go into construction by the end of the year. So that's pretty exciting. The other thing that I was involved in is we approved as the council the Promise program with the college, and we've been working on some flyers and some stuff that we'll starting to promote all that collaboration between the city and the college to get people to come to the junior college. And I did receive a letter today that I forgot in my car, but Chief White, can you explain what process you were reviewed and you got a A+?
He's talking about the jail inspection.
Oh. Yes. You thought you didn't have to say anything today, huh?
Yeah, if you're referring to the jail inspection, BSCC did come and looked at it, and it's kind of a long story, but there's been a number of challenges with that facility and a bunch of new regulations and enforcement of old regulations. So we did a lot of work during the last inspection, and this cycle around, we passed with flying colors. So everybody did a great job, and he had good comments when he came here. I didn't know that you got a copy, but it's good. It was an A+.
All right, thank you very much. I think that's my report. I don't think there's anything else. Any future agenda items? Any in the council? If not, adjourn at 8:32.
Bless you.